European companies have adjusted quite well to the tariff shock, actually better than US companies. Large investments, large infrastructures, research, new technologies, cybersecurity, nurturing the venture capital ecosystem. It's very important that Ukraine continues with these reforms that will bring it closer to the EU.
Nadia Calvino, the European Investment Bank President, thank you very much for joining me. The global economy is at a sensitive point right now, not just the tariffs over Greenland, at least the threat of them, but unrest in Iran, and there's still no end in sight to the war in Ukraine. All that translates into tighter fiscal space, credit risk, rates risk as well. Is this the right time for Europe to be taking on more economic risk?
Well, I don't think that we're taking more economic risk by ensuring that we grow, that we reinforce and step up our security and defense capabilities, that we support Ukraine. That is actually preserving our security, our peace, and economic prosperity going forward. We need to keep our unity right now. Our unity is our strength. And if we are united, we are unstoppable. We've gone through crises throughout history. And we have always succeeded when we kept our unity, we were determined, and we acted on the basis of solidarity. I think this is the right approach, and I hope that that will continue to be our approach also in the European Council this Thursday.
But it sounds like what you're saying is that it's worth it to borrow in these uncertain times in order to invest in the types of projects that you've talked about and that you will talk about. But it, of course, carries a risk. So who should carry on that risk? And do you need fresh guarantees in order to be able to carry out your work in these uncertain times?
Well, no. In the current situation, the European Investment Bank is in a very solid position. We have a very strong 45% core tier 1 capital. We have, as I said a moment ago, a AAA. We see financial markets that are actually looking to buy our bonds. We have a very strong standing in financial markets. We have a very strong portfolio and very strong also risk management mechanisms. So actually we're one of the few multilateral institutions that right now can continue to play an important role in the world without calling on our shareholders to increase our capital. And that puts us in a quite unique position. That and having the 27 European member states as our shareholders, neither more nor less.
Okay. And you're lifting defense-related spending to 4.5 billion. What exactly counts as defense in your book, and what's still off limits?
For the past 2 years, there's been a sea change in terms of step change, really, in terms of the activities of the European Investment Bank Group in the area of security and defense. We extended the scope of projects that can be financed so that we are actually doing pure military projects. And we also removed the absolute caps that existed in the past, so that every year we can determine what are our financing targets. And actually in 2025, I can give you a heads up of the results we will be announcing next week. We outperformed our targets. So we already provided more than 4 billion euros in finance for security and defense projects in 2025. And that's close to 5% of our total financing inside the European Union. Our target for 26 is 4.5 billion. I'm quite confident we will also outperform it. And we are talking about projects that range from military mobility, key military infrastructures, for example, a military campus in Lithuania that will host a Bundeswehr brigade, actually, and a new campus also in the west of Lithuania, to enhancements of ports throughout the EU. We're also talking about industrial capacity, for example, quantum systems, a drone manufacturer in Germany, we are financing. Also support to SMEs in the supply chain. We have an agreement with Deutsche Bank to provide liquidity to small and medium-sized enterprises in Europe. Research and development, very important deals with Thales, with Indra, to finance their research programs. And finally, we're also nurturing the emerging ecosystem of investment, venture capital and investment funds in Europe in the area of security and defense. So I would say from the European Investment Bank Group, it's clear we're playing our part in supporting Europe's capacity in this very important area.
So that's quite a wide-ranging number of ways that you're supporting defense. But when most people think of defense, they think of weapons and ammunition. Has the taboo over weapons financing been broken? Is that something that you can see changing?
Well, you know, we are a multilateral development institution, and it's very important to preserve that status. And it's also important to bear in mind that we are not a defense ministry. So, as I was saying, each one should play its part. And the European Investment Bank is focusing where we can really make a difference and where we're very good at. Large investments, long-term investments, large infrastructures, research, new technologies, cybersecurity, nurturing the venture capital ecosystem. That is an area where the EIB is very strong and where we are already making a difference for Europe.
Now, some of the comments that you see online under TikTok posts or Twitter, they say, why are we spending billions of taxpayer cash on Ukraine when we should be spending on schools and hospitals at home? Maybe you could explain how the funding actually works and why it's necessary to spend on Ukraine and not, let's say, schools and hospitals at home.
Well, we have to do both, and I fully agree, and I am very mindful always to listen to citizens. You know, schools and hospitals underpin the European way of life. This is our social market economy. This is what brings shared prosperity. And so the European Investment Bank is a very important player in this area in terms of health, in terms of hospitals, and increasingly so also in housing. Only in 2025, we have provided more than 5 billion euros in housing, and our target is 6 billion euros for 26. So we're there where we can, as I said before, make a difference for citizens, for businesses, and for Europe as a whole. But that should not impede us to see that we also need to support Ukraine. Ukraine right now plays a key role to preserve our security, our peace, our stability, even our border protection. And so from this point of view, we need to do both. And from the European Investment Bank Group, we are acting, and we're the main investment partner to the Ukrainian government when it comes to rebuilding infrastructures, also water supply, hospitals, kindergarten, schools, universities, energy infrastructures, transport infrastructures, also supporting SMEs in Ukraine and European SMEs exporting to Ukraine through our trade finance support and guarantees, because that is what we need to do now in order to ensure that there is resilience in the country. And I hope that we focus on the reconstruction and the strong recovery once the war is over.
And you're taking credit, you're not taking taxpayers' cash and giving it to Ukraine.
No, absolutely not. What we use is the European budget guarantees, and which are instrumental, obviously, to be operating in a country in war right now. And of course, we borrow in financial markets around 60 billion euros a year, with which we finance our investments. And I should also add, the EIB, and maybe your viewers don't know it, we are profitable. We make more than 2 billion euros in profit every year, which we bring to our reserves to continue to enhance and reinforce our capital and to provide our financial stability. That's what guarantees that we can provide long-term finance in good conditions.
There were concerns last year when President Zelensky seemed on the verge of dismantling, or if you're putting it favorably, at least reforming anti-corruption regulators and investigators in Ukraine. Are you concerned about how your money is being spent there?
Well, absolutely. This is a top priority for us. We have our own internal investigation processes, which are focusing a lot on Ukraine these days. We have agreements with the anti-corruption institutions in the country where we're helping them to build capacity, but also working on a daily basis with them. We also have a very tight cooperation with the World Bank, with the UN Development Program, with all those agencies that are on the ground. And we're operating not only with the government and not only with the private sector, also with a network of mayors of the cities throughout Ukraine that also create a capacity, for managing European investments. And all in all, what I can say is that it's very good that there was a decision to pull back some of those decisions and to make sure that there is a strong anti-corruption governance and architecture in the country. And actually, it's very important that Ukraine continues with these reforms that will bring it closer to the EU. Because accession to the EU and the EU enlargement is obviously going to be one of our top priorities once the war is over. But it requires Ukraine to be up to the European standards when it comes to fighting corruption. That goes without saying.
And you're holding a 100 billion euro financing target for 2026. I think it depends on how you count it, but at one count, over half of it is still climate funding. How do you defend that to citizens of Europe who think defence is by far the much more important immediate priority?
Well, actually climate action and having a successful green transition in Europe is also a matter of security for the future. It is a no-brainer, really. We have discovered the hard way that we can no longer depend on fossil fuel producers around the world. And that makes it imperative that we are masters of our own future, that we are successful in the energy transition, which frankly is in full swing. You see it in Germany is a case at hand, and the European Investment Bank is supporting key investments from the upgrading of distribution networks and the Stadtwerke to offshore wind farms, innovative fuels. So we are a key partner to private sector and public players that are bringing in and pursuing this green transition, which is a matter of competitiveness, low energy prices for citizens and businesses, and a matter of security so that Europe has strategic autonomy and can punch its weight in the global scenario.
Okay, and speaking more about Europe, tech is obviously a very important development, and you've talked about a 70 billion euro push for tech firms and innovators in Europe. Why hasn't Europe cracked these kind of scale-ups yet? And how do you convince people that you're not just sending good money after bad?
Oh, Europe is a technology powerhouse, and sometimes we're not aware of our own strengths. Our universities and research centers are stellar, second to none.
But we don't make the leading chips, we don't have the AI stack that the US...
Let me get to that. So we have a vibrant ecosystem of startups. The number of startups created per year in Europe is equal to the one in the US. Integration of new technologies by EU firms, that also comes out of our investment survey, is similar to that on the other side of the Atlantic. We are the incubator of the world. What we need is to make sure that we can scale up those successful entrepreneurs, ideas and technologies so that they can grow and prosper in Europe, that they don't have to look for the capital on the other side of the Atlantic. Yes, we are not a defense superpower. The European project is a peace project. And we are not in the lead when it comes to AI and digital infrastructures. Okay, we need to catch up. And from the European Union, we are building on the network of AI high-performance computing in Europe and to build AI factories that can provide that capacity to European companies. We are a world superpower when it comes to quantum computing, also health tech, medical devices, also aerospace. Look at Airbus. Look at our capacity to build aerospace capacities also. The European Space Agency is in a very powerful position. And so we have to look at our strengths, not only our weaknesses, and build on those strengths and scale them up. Now, for that, we need large-scale investment, integration of our markets. That is critical. We need to simplify our rules and the way we work and our bureaucracy, reduce red tape. And I would argue also build strong win-win partnerships around the world.
But what a lot of startup creators have complained about, and you touched on it a bit there, is the lack of risk capital, venture capital funding in Europe. Do you have a role in some way in that, in stimulating that kind of market? Because it's been a long time complaint, and that's why they're going to the US, because they can get that kind of risk capital.
Indeed, that is a key gap between the EU and the US, and that is an area where the European Investment Bank group, including the European Investment Fund, is already playing a very important role. Only this week there was an important report published, the 5 report, how to boost risk capital in Europe, which has been drafted amongst others by the ex-finance minister Jörg Kukies. And they are actually saying the EIB is playing a key role in mobilizing and is very successful. We have already created a very good ecosystem of investment funds and venture capital funds. We have been able to support the creation of 12 mega funds, more than 1 billion euros in capital, and even 9 unicorns in Europe in the last 2 years. Now what we need to do is scale it up, and we're working on that to launch the European Tech Champions Initiative's second phase, which is, we hope, going to be able to also mobilize private investors in productive investments in Europe. What I want is, I think, to make us all aware of our strengths, because that's the successful way forward, to build on our strengths and address our weaknesses. And the European Investment Bank Group is determined to play its role to the maximum and use its firepower to the maximum to contribute to that success.
Now, for many years now, the EIB has been accused of systemic lack of transparency, including by the EU Ombudsman. Have you addressed those concerns fully? Is the EIB now transparent enough?
Well, definitely. For the last 2 years since I became president of the EIB, I have made it a top priority to raise to the highest standards when it comes to transparency, accountability. We are the only multilateral institution that's actually supervised liquidity, capital governance. We have our supervisory system. And so we are subject to best banking practices and the highest standards in that regard. This is a top priority for me because it is very important that we are clear and we respond to the expectations of European citizens and our democracies. And I think that we have made very good progress. I am proud to say that we feel ourselves to be amongst the highest standards when it comes to multilateral development banks and international financial institutions.
And so you've just approved a new EIB global strategic roadmap. Did you do that in public consultation in the countries which you invest in?
We have done a very large consultation, yes, with the member states, with key stakeholders, with our key clients around the world. We have had many discussions. And basically what we have seen is that we can reinforce our impact if we focus on win-win partnerships, which can mean individual projects, but it can also be international partnerships with the Vaccine Alliance and other international players, so that we can ensure that we contribute to a stronger world, a stronger Europe, in a safer world, a more stable world. That is our role, and we are also, orienting all our financing and the projects we finance in that direction, with a view to being fully aligned with Europe's priorities and Europe's interest around the world.
But were the public also involved in the consultations?
Yes, we have been participating, not let's say a general consultation, but we have been engaging with key stakeholders, NGOs, and other key players that are active in that area. And I must say, it's the first ever EIB Global Strategy. It's the first time the EIB actually has a strategy for our engagements around the world. I think it's very timely because it will allow us to play our role to the fullest, in contributing to these strong, fair, win-win partnerships around the world that are important and bring benefit to the countries we're working with, but also to the European interest, and being fully aligned with the priorities of our shareholders, the 27 member states.
Well, the NGO Bankwatch expressed concerns, especially about your previous roadmap, let's say, that placed the EIB as a tool of economic diplomacy and a means of advancing the EU's geopolitical interests, as they put it. Though basically the yardstick for EU development policy is poverty reduction and sustainable development, but the EIB strategy language repeatedly frames lending outside the EU as serving EU geopolitical and economic goals. Have you changed that?
Well, but we have to achieve both. In the current geopolitical context, it's clear. And our projects actually contribute to both. Let me give you an example. Only recently, we have signed the financing last week of the largest solar power plant in Egypt. That obviously is building a strong partnership with Egypt, and that's a key player for stability in the Middle East and a key partner to Europe around the world and in this new global order. We are financing some of the largest water infrastructures in Africa or health infrastructures in West Africa. Preserving strong societies, healthy societies in Western Africa contributes to the development of those countries, but also to Europe's interest in terms of having a stable and peaceful neighborhood. So, as I said, our aim is to pursue win-win partnerships that work and support development and prosperity in those countries, but also pursue Europe's priorities around the world.
Nadia Calvino, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.